Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read The History of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia by Samuel Johnson. And this got on my radar a month or two ago while I was reading Jane Eyre. One of the characters in the book, I believe her name was Helen. It's the strangely mature young girl that Jane meets at the schoolyard while she's reading a book. Helen's always reading a book. We'll call her Helen. And they have these very adult conversations about happiness. Helen and Jane have these conversations about happiness and situational circumstances and worldviews and how to get along in life and how to be happy and these very strangely mature adult conversations. The poor girl, Helen, ends up dying at the end of this episode at the schoolyard before Jane moves on. And we see this girl always reading these books. And I believe the first one that's mentioned was The History of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia. And it caught my attention because it's written by James Boswell. And I hadn't read this prior, but I had read the Life of Samuel Johnson by James Boswell. Johnson is this huge, larger than life, incredibly intelligent, complex man that Boswell was writing about. And it turned me on, of course, to reading some of the actual work by Samuel Johnson. And I have this big book. It's a Selected Writings by Oxford Press. And I have read quite a bit in here from articles out of the Rambler, also his Lives of the Poets, Dryden and Pope. Really interesting, peculiar but interesting. And this is one of those Oriental books. It's a philosophical novel, and in the introduction, it's mentioned that Johnson was very clear that this actually was not a novel. He describes it as a tale, and he says, a tale, a narrative, a story, commonly a slight or petty account of some trifling or fabulous incident. And the fact that Johnson wrote a dictionary, Johnson's Dictionary, it gives it a little bit of weight when he decides whether or not his own work is a novel or a tale. Also, the fact that he wrote a dictionary makes the whole reading experience have this additional layer of curiosity. Somebody that hand wrote the definition of every word, pondered over it, pored over it. And so when you're reading his words, it's just interesting to think, even more so than every other author that's doing the same thing, but someone that's also defining words, how he's choosing them, and what he thinks they mean. And every paragraph has one of those $5 words on it. And whether or not it's a novel or a tale, it was great. I really enjoyed the book. I would say it's not a novel because it doesn't have all of the typical trappings that one would consider. It feels more like a philosophical tale or a moralizing tale. It has this terrific premise. It's this walled off, this mountained off portion of land that's paradise. There's a king of Abyssinia who has created this Eden-like garden of a small country where everything is taken care of. All of the architecture is the most beautiful, fabulous architecture. They have arts and entertainment, all of the best food. Once a year, a giant gate opens up, and the emperor comes back with festivities, and everybody's needs are completely taken care of. It's just supposed to be paradise, and Rasselas is the prince of this paradise. And when we find him, he's filled with confusion and discontent. He's out on a field and he's seeing squirrels running by and birds flying and hopping around and goats jumping and playing, and he's wondering what's the difference between what they're doing day after day and what he's doing day after day. When they're both thirsty, they have a drink. When they're both hungry, they get something to eat. When they're tired, they fall asleep. They wake up with the sun. They go to sleep at the sunset. And it just feels like he's living this waking dream. Every day is the same day. And there's a priest. He has this interaction with a priest very early on in the book. And Rasselas confides in him that he's not happy. And the priest says, you have no idea the miseries of the world, the suffering, the pain, the punishments, the hardships that are going on outside of these, outside of this paradise, on the other side of these mountains. And the bishop makes a very clear point to say that you have no want of anything. You have no needs. Everything necessary is taken care of for you. And it dawns on Rasselas that the fact that he doesn't have any needs means that he has nothing to strive for. He has nothing to seek. He has no goals. He's not in pursuit of anything. There are no challenges. And it drives him to the exact opposite effect of what this poor bishop was trying to convince him of. It drives him to escape this paradise. And that's interesting. He starts interacting with some of the other people that are around this paradise. There's an inventor. He talks to this inventor and a handful of other people that start confiding that they're also not happy. He talks to the inventor. The inventor wants to escape. His sister, Rasselas' sister, wants to escape. And so it starts creating not just this underpinning for a philosophical, like a springboard for philosophical story. It starts really feeling dreamlike and the kind of short story that Kafka might create, where it feels imaginative and nightmarish, all of these unnecessary restraints, and it feels like it's not really as it seems. Is it a paradise or is it a prison? These mountain regions that completely wall off this area cannot be traversed. They're impenetrable. They're so steep that you can't climb them. The gates, there's one gate that gets in and out of the paradise, is only opened once a year. The rest of the time, it's impenetrable and also guarded by centurions. And this is the beginning. They have to escape, and there's at least one comedic episode where he's talking to this inventor. Rasselas is talking to this inventor, and the inventor says that he's like the most fabulous inventor in the world. That's why he was brought in on one of the years that the gate was open for the festivities. He's never left since. The inventor talks about how he can create a flying machine, and they talk about this and how the natural realms of different animals and beasts are for the land, and fish are for the ocean, birds are in the sky, and the inventor's saying, well, these are all different mediums that we can challenge. The oceans and water is just a denser medium, and so we just need to create something that flaps wings real fast and we can fly. And there's not too many very funny parts, but the moment that he comes back with his winged contraption and the inventor decides to launch himself off a cliff, promptly plummets into a pond or something and comes out all dizzy and scraped up and of course, Rasselas, expecting this result, but also being disappointed that it didn't work, he finally comes across a philosopher. And um, after a series of episodes, the philosopher Rasselas and his sister, the princess, do manage to escape. And the book is in some ways, very similar to Candide, where we have the castle of Wisteria. Candide gets kicked out, has a series of adventures, um, has a philosopher, Pangloss. There's a lot of philosophizing going on, and it's episodic by nature. Um, this story, though, it does feel critical of different kinds of philosophies, worldviews that one might have. I wouldn't say that it has the same biting wit or sarcasm, and it's probably not as fun. But I found it fascinating. As soon as they escape, after sort of the premise period of the novel, we do have this driving narrative that's being forced on by philosophy, so that the prince, the philosopher, and the princess want to, and it was worded really well by the introduction. Let me see. Okay, this is the first line of the introduction. Is it possible to achieve a state of enduring earthly happiness? And so the pursuit and the understanding of happiness on this earth is the goal of this troop of people. And so first they go to Cairo, and it's this booming commercial city. It's the hub of the world, in the world of the Orient, and that we have all these merchants and mercantile society. They spend time there. They go and spend time with a hermit. Can you find life? Can you find happiness in solitude? They spend time with high society, the kings and queens and noblemen. They spend time in domestic life. And for each of these portions, they're disappointed that they're not fun when they're interacting with people that are working all the time, trading and selling. They're not happy. The hermit that they come across confides that if he could do it over again, he would not have spent the past 14 years as a hermit. They find, well, for lack of a better term, they find hippies that want to become one with nature, and they're describing how becoming one with nature is how you become happy. And and aside from finding not finding happiness in all of these different scenarios, the people that do start philosophizing usually turn out to be crackpots. And I mentioned, I bookmarked. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Yeah, so this is one of these people describing how happiness comes from really becoming one with nature. When I find young men so humble and so docile, said the philosopher, I can deny them no information which my studies have enabled me to afford. To live according to nature is to act always with due regard to the fitness arising from the relations and qualities of causes and effects, to concur with the great and unchangeable scheme of universal felicity, to cooperate with the general disposition and tendency of the present system of things. So this is Rasselas' response. The prince soon found that this was one of those sages whom he should understand less as he heard him longer. So he didn't understand what this guy was talking about. And of course, it's nonsense. And we have a whole portion of this tale where we have moralizing or philosophical vignettes that go across. And the prince, princess, and philosopher, and a couple other people in this troupe, their reaction to it and their conversations. And we get great discussions and debates because they'll go off and then come back and discuss what they've learned with one another. And they get into argument about marriage and whether or not marriage is natural, is it unnatural, is it the route or path, is it the route or path to happiness, is it the route or path to misery. And the princess really does get does share center stage. So there's a lot of, you know, what does she think of the world from her perspective, and what does he think of the world from his perspective. They're both trust fund babies running around, leaving paradise. They're always upset that people aren't bowing to them, and have no conception of some of them. No conception of, at least as they're going through this, that happiness isn't going to be this constant state of emotion that you can find yourself in that idea being what you're striving for. There's a moment where the philosopher comes back after this and says, "Let's go visit the pyramids, and we'll look at history and the architecture, these magnificent monuments that man created centuries ago." And the prince and princess are both they have this reaction where they're saying, "Well, we're interested in the happiness of mankind, not old buildings." And the philosopher has to explain, yeah, here it is, the importance of history, and it's amazing. Let me see. To know anything, returned the poet, we must know its effects. To see men, we must see their works, that we may learn what reason has dictated, or passion has incited, and find what are the most powerful motives of action. To judge rightly of the present, we must oppose it to the past. For all judgment is comparative, and of the future nothing can be known. The truth is that no mind is much employed upon the present. Recollection and anticipation fill up almost all our moments. Our passions are joy and grief, love and hatred, hope and fear. Of joy and grief, the past is the object, and the future of hope and fear. Even love and hatred respect the past, for the cause must have been before the effect. And it goes on, but the philosopher is explaining that having an understanding of the doings of humanity, the history of the world that you live in, is important, and it's going to give you some context into how we're living our lives today. So, even the prince and princess are sort of like these Beauvoir and Picochet characters, where they want to assume all of this knowledge without having any of the groundwork. We're not sure how much studying they were doing in paradise. But then after this series, it does turn dramatic, and there is quite a good turn in a narrative development. They get to the pyramids. They're amazed, and the way that the pyramid is described is just great. Just being overwhelmed by the grandeur and the size of these things that were built centuries ago. And they are going to go down this tunnel, one of the doorways and paths that goes into one of the pyramids. And the princess's servant is afraid. It doesn't want to go in. Believes that there's souls that are going to be disturbed. And somebody says, well, souls don't exist. Somebody else says, well, they do exist. We get a philosophical argument. But then we go back to the princess and the servant. And the servant doesn't want the princess to go in. The princess desires that the servant does. And it's relinquished. The princess says, I'm not going to gain cowardice, but you don't have to gain bravery. You can go back to the tent, but I am going in. And so the prince princess and the philosopher, they go into the annals of the pyramid. And when they come out, they go back to their tent that they were camping at. The servant had been kidnapped by Arabs, and they had run off, and the other servants in the tent are describing what happened. And the prince wants to go running off after him. The philosopher has to explain that they're not going to be able to catch him. These are professional bandits. You're not a professional bandit. We can send people after them, but you have to let reality take hold of the situation, not your instincts or hot-headed emotions. The princess, meanwhile, finally, or I shouldn't say finally, but she experiences grief, remorse, depression, in very real and specific ways. This whole time, we've had these characters sort of walking on clouds, intellectually talking about what it means to be happy, and having a very distanced relationship with all the people that they're meeting through these cities and towns and caves and forests and all the places that they go, and having very distanced intellectual responses. And we see this poor princess go through stages of grief. The philosopher is working with her. They're trying to console her, recognizing that to be in this state is healthy and natural, but if it's permanent, then it's not. And she needs to be working through this. It was really powerful, emotionally effective, and we get a story of the servant's actually alive, and it's an adventure, and they can go off and find her, and it goes on from there. It's a few other episodes. It's a great part with the astronomer, and then of course, how does a tale like this come to a conclusion? And I thought it was fine. It's mostly these interesting conversations that I don't ever bookmark books. Now that I make videos, I do it more so because they're little talking points. And I found myself bookmarking a lot of passages that were just strikingly good. I really enjoyed it. It's a long fiction prose piece by Samuel Johnson, The History of Rasselas, Prince of Abissinia. So let me know if you've read it. I thought it was terrific. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care.